You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and today we dive into week number 11 of the NFL. We're breaking down the matchups, predicting who we think's coming out on top, and I invite you all to do the same and comment down below. Let me hear from you. Who do you like, who do you dislike, and why in this week's matchups? We're going through all of Sunday's games. We'll preview Monday's matchup on Sunday, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. Coming off a nice W as the Patriots got a comfortable win over the New York Jets. But we'll start, of course, as we always do, when there's an overseas game, bright and early. Commanders taking on the Dolphins over in Madrid, Spain. I think this game can be boiled down to something fairly simple between both of these two teams because they have some similar struggles that they've been dealing with, and that is going to be ball security. You look at Miami and the way things stand for them right now, leading the NFL with 17 total turnovers and 12 of those coming in their last 5 games that they've played. Washington's not doing too much better as well, sitting on 12 offensive turnovers, and prior to last week's matchup against the Detroit Lions, they had turned the ball over 2 or more times in 4 straight games. Again, they cleaned it up last week somehow, some way in that blowout victory, but I do think that either one of these teams has a really good shot to win this game, and the thing that could kind of tip the scales in their favor is just not giving their opponent the opportunity to force a turnover or just take away the football outright. Both of these defenses have not been great at forcing turnovers. Washington's sitting on 6 to the Miami Dolphins 10, and both of those rank bottom 10 in the NFL. Washington's actually second worst in the league. So I think just taking care of the football, not overthinking things, don't put yourself in a bad position where you're giving an extra drive or two to your opponent, and ultimately you'll put yourself in a good spot to potentially win this game. Something else that I'm really looking at, though, and I really want to highlight here, is the Miami Dolphins defense, specifically against the run, really starting to tighten up and finding some success, especially when you look at the first 6 or so weeks of the season. It was pretty tough for Miami in stopping the run. They did have a not so great performance against the Baltimore Ravens a few weeks ago, but sandwiched around all of that was a really strong game against Bijan Robinson, a really strong game against James Cook, and if they can just find a way to replicate some of those performances here against a Washington team that's coming in, no starting quarterback in Jaden Daniels, obviously with Marcus Mariota leading the way right now, and an offense that's averaging about 14 points per game over their past 3, they have themselves a good opportunity to come away with a nice solid win here and put themselves with 4 on the season. I do think ultimately Miami does come away with the win in this game just because there's a few things about Washington right now that's really starting to scare me. Obviously, not having your starting quarterback is one of them, and you've been missing Terry McLaurin for basically all of the season at this point. But the way the defense collapsed last week is just a sign of it almost feels like a buyout as opposed to a buy-in from this team. I could be wrong. Maybe the Lions are just that overwhelming of an offense with Dan Campbell calling things for them, but I feel like things are trending in a really wrong direction for Washington right now, whereas even with Miami in the situation they're in, they're putting together some solid performances, and especially defensively, it seems like they've been toughening up, especially against the run. So I'll take the Dolphins. I think this one ends up being a little bit of a lower scoring affair, unless Washington's defense is what we saw last week, and that's a sign of things to come. I think this one ends up being lower scoring, Miami 20-16, something within that ballpark, but I do think the Dolphins get the job done in this first one. We'll take a look at that 1 p.m. Eastern window here, starting with the Panthers and Falcons, a rematch from earlier in the season where the Falcons got absolutely obliterated 30-0. Offense for Atlanta needs to protect the football first and foremost. They turned the ball over 3 times in that first matchup, 2 of those being Michael Penix interceptions. I think leaning on Bijan Robinson is probably the best case situation that they could put themselves in to maybe come away with a victory here. The way this offense operates, and it looks its best, is with Bijan Robinson getting as many touches as possible, producing as much production and just yardage as possible for this offense. And with Carolina's run defense taking a little bit of a step back over the last 3 games, allowing about 157 yards per game in those last 3, with 245 on the ground to Buffalo a few weeks ago, this is probably their best bet to find a win. And if you look at Atlanta's games so far this season and the wins they've come away with, they have not won a game without rushing for at least 128 yards on the ground. They're 3-2 in those games, but they have not won a game where they haven't pushed nearly 130 yards on the ground with Bijan and Tyler Algier. So lean into your backs, help out your young quarterback who has had some struggles so far this season. I think you could put yourself in a good spot. On the other side, though, Carolina, a big part of the reason why they're currently 5-5 is they found so much success running the football, and they're 4-1 in games where the team finished with at least 125 yards rushing or more. That being said, though, Atlanta's run defense, it's been starting to melt down, and it hasn't been pretty for Carolina as far as running the football as of late, and it's been a little bit of an issue for them and why they're starting to slip in some games. There is a good opportunity, though, that maybe this could be the bounce back game to get themselves back into the win column. But the problem with that, though, is that I'm not a believer in what Bryce Young is doing over there at quarterback. And this is a Falcons pass defense and a pass rush that's been getting home, that's been effective, that's been slowing down some of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. You look back a few weeks ago to that game against Josh Allen. They can do some damage there. And that's where I think the weakness lies within this Carolina Panthers team, and ultimately why, even though the Falcons got their doors blown off the first matchup here, I think if they protect the football, they lean on Bijan Robinson, if they keep this game a lower scoring affair, they can come away with a victory at home. So I'm taking the Falcons, and I'm taking the Falcons in one of those lower scoring gritty contests. I think both of these defenses are in a position where they could have themselves a strong performance, because we've seen some really good stuff from Carolina's defense overall over the last few weeks, holding teams down and keeping them out of the end zone. So I think I like Atlanta 16-13, something within that ballpark. It's not a crazy matchup by any means. Defenses win out. I honestly think you don't get necessarily great performances from either one of the QBs, and you're leaning on the ground attack from both sides to try and find success here, but I think Atlanta could squeak out the win at home this time around and split the series with the Carolina Panthers. Next one we're looking at, and I can't believe this is a 1 p.m. matchup here, but we have ourselves the Buccaneers going into Buffalo to take on the Bills. And I think my first question here is going to be just if Tampa Bay can match the offensive output of those Buffalo Bills. You're continuing to miss out on guys like Bucky Irving, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and it's somewhat hurting the effectiveness and just overall ability of this Tampa Bay offense. They're averaging about 18 points per game over their last 3 games with 23 in back-to-back matchups. Obviously, that number getting dragged down a bit by their performance against the Detroit Lions, only putting up 9, but that's compared to the 31 points per game that they were scoring the previous 4 games before these last 3 that they've played. Buffalo comes in with obviously one of the more potent offenses in the NFL, with the potential upside being very high up there, but they're also coming off of a wildly poor performance against the Miami Dolphins that I don't think anyone saw coming in the slightest, turning the ball over 3 different times, Josh Allen having a really tough matchup there. And they're also going to be without Dalton Kincaid, who leads the team in yards per reception. He's second in yards. On top of that, he's got 5 touchdowns as well, which I believe is a team lead on top of that. So a key piece could potentially be out for that matchup. At least as of this recording, I am not privy to whether he's going to be in or not for the game, but that could be a blow there. But I will be curious if Buffalo, who's just relying so heavily on Emeka Egbuka to carry a massive load as a rookie for this offense, it could be a little bit of a problem there. I do think, though, that if there's anything that could really help out Tampa Bay, and it could really hurt Buffalo in this game, is going to be the Bills' inability to stop the run. Now, for what it's worth, Rachaad White and Sean Tucker have been doing their best to hold down the fort since Bucky Irving ultimately stopped playing, I think, week 4 due to injury. So it's been a while. And since week 5, they've been averaging about, and this is the team as a whole, not just these 2 running backs, but as a team, averaging about 80 yards per game on the ground. Now, you look at Buffalo's run defense, currently sitting on 3rd most in yards per game allowed. They're allowing a league-high 5.5 yards per attempt. They've given up 197 yards to Miami, 210 to Atlanta, 189 to New Orleans, and 238 to Baltimore. The run defense has been a bit of a nightmare for the Buffalo Bills, and I know a lot of that has to do with the injuries and just the rotating cast that they have seen within their defensive front all season long. It feels like that defensive front has not been completely healthy for nearly the entirety of the season, and that is a piece of it. But it even started off in week number 1 of the season with that just obliteration on the ground, courtesy of the Baltimore Ravens. So this is one of those things where if the Buccaneers can lean on the ground attack, lean on those running backs this week, maybe find some holes to open it up, and ultimately keep the Bills' defense a little bit more honest with how they're playing, it should open things up for a guy like Emeka Egbuka, who you are relying so heavily on in the passing game to keep this offense moving each and every single week right now. I just don't know if it's going to be enough. And I'm a little bit worried about where Tampa Bay currently stands right now offensively, and it's more just a health thing than anything else. Sounds like Bucky Irving could potentially be back next week, maybe the week after, and then I'll really start to feel good about this team again, especially once Chris Godwin gets back in the fold. But I think over the last 3 games, the way we've seen Tampa Bay's offense struggle in certain situations, a lot of that just boils down to current health and roster depletion on the offensive side of the ball due to injury. So I think I like the Buffalo Bills in this one, but I do think Tampa Bay, as they have been all season long, keeps it competitive, keeps it close, but the Bills come away with something along the lines of like a 24-21 victory. The next game we'll look at is the Chargers and Jaguars here, and this one could be a Jacksonville Jaguar nightmare at home. As you look at the Jaguars and the way this pass defense has played for basically going on nearly 2 seasons now at this point, because they struggled last year as well. Justin Herbert comes in tied for 4th in the NFL in passing yards per game this season at 261 yards per, with 4th place as in touchdown passes as well, sitting on 19 on the season. He's found success throwing the football to Quentin Johnston, to Keenan Allen, to Ladd McConkey. We're even seeing Rondé Gadsden get involved, the tight end over there, emerging as well. Now, Quentin Johnston is questionable in this game and could potentially miss the matchup here, but still plenty of targets for him to throw the football to. And when you look at Jacksonville, a bottom 5 passing defense once again this season, allowing 21 passing touchdowns so far this league as well, which puts them near the top of the list. And they're coming off a game in which Davis Mills, of all people, put together a near 300-yard performance against them in a epic collapse in the 4th quarter where a good chunk of that yardage came from. I am a little bit concerned about how this Jacksonville defense fares against Justin Herbert and company. You couple that with the fact that the pass rush over there has been near the bottom of the NFL, despite the fact that you have some premier first-round talent working off the edges at the very least. I mean, it's just one of those things where if you can't make Justin Herbert uncomfortable, he's going to make you pay. He's got nearly 1,800 yards passing when he's not facing pressure, according to Next Gen Stats, 12 touchdowns, 2 picks, and he has the 3rd best completion percentage, again, all when not facing pressure. If Jacksonville can't make him uncomfortable, we've seen what Justin Herbert can do this season. You couple that with the fact that Jacksonville's offense just continues to show signs of regression week in and week out. They're struggling to find the end zone every single week. Like, yeah, you had the 3 touchdowns against Las Vegas, but outside of that, 2 touchdowns versus Houston, 2 touchdowns versus Seattle. You had 1 versus LA, and you're settling for all of these field goals. And the Chargers right now, defense pretty good, allowing about 20 points per game. And in the last 3 games they've played, allowing only about 13. It's a top 10 pass defense. They're one of 6 teams in the NFL right now that have not allowed double-digit passing touchdowns yet. And to this point, it's only sitting at 9. Like, this is a good unit. And unfortunately for Jacksonville, injuries, the defense, a lot of things are working against this team, and it just feels like the trend is in the wrong direction right now. And I'm also on record as one of those people that has not really been buying what Jacksonville has been selling, even since they were like 4-1, I believe they were at one point in the season. So I'm fading Jacksonville in this one. I think the Chargers win, and I think it kind of gets a little bit ugly. I have the Chargers winning 30-17 in a pretty comfortable victory. I think Justin Herbert has himself a day, and if not, potentially like his best performance of the season. So buckle up. I'm a little bit concerned about Jacksonville in this one for you Jaguars fans. Bears and Vikings will be the next game that we look at here, and this one could be a bit of a nightmare game for J.J. McCarthy, specifically speaking, because Chicago comes in with the most turnover-hungry defense in the NFL right now, and which is no real surprise considering who their defensive coordinator is. But J.J. McCarthy, so far to this point in his young career, has been prone to making a lot of mistakes and turnovers here, and Chicago leading the NFL in takeaways with 20 on the season, with 5 different games of 3 or more takeaways. This could be a bit of a nightmare. Now, the first time these 2 teams matched up, Minnesota definitely squeaked away with one in Chicago. This one, obviously, being in Minnesota, you probably feel pretty good about it, already having a win over your opponent. But I am definitely feeling like we're seeing a trend in the wrong direction for J.J. McCarthy and this offense. You couple that with the fact that things have been pretty banged up in the secondary for Chicago, and now suddenly it sounds like there's a possibility that Jalen Johnson, who didn't even get activated to practice, I believe, until either today or yesterday, if I'm remembering correctly, is now listed as questionable and potentially even available for the secondary going into this game, which would be huge against the wide receiver room led by Justin Jefferson and, of course, Jordan Addison. there could be some problems for a young J.J. McCarthy in what this defense has been doing to basically every offense they've come up against this year. On the flip side, I look at Chicago's offense, and I will say I do have some reservations about how Chicago's offense has operated this season. They go through quarters where they just look abysmal, and then they have quarters where they're rattling off, 14-plus points to help get them back into games, especially late in football games. But I think with the way Minnesota's run defense has been so far this season, which has been very up and down, especially the past 4 games, they held Detroit and Philadelphia to an average of about 55 yards per game, but then you give up 207 yards to the Chargers, and I believe Kamani Vidal as the running back. And then, of course, the 157 yards he gave up to Baltimore as well. If you can just get a solid game from DeAndre Swift, Kyle Monangai, whatever the combination is of running backs, because I know health has been a bit of an issue in that backfield. If you can just give them a solid game on the ground, open things up for the passing attack, Caleb Williams, it's been mind-boggling to watch, because when he's on it, and when he's not, he's not. And I think a lot of this has to do with just running the football effectively. If they can just run the ball efficiently and not force Caleb Williams into too many scenarios of having to play Superman, moving all over the pocket, buying as much time as possible to find somebody open downfield, I think the Chicago Bears can get this one back over on the Minnesota Vikings and split this series. So I am taking the Bears, but I expect the Vikings to make them fight for it, very similar to the first matchup that these two teams had. But I will take Chicago 23-20 here. This next one, Packers and Giants. And I feel like you say it out loud and you go, oh, this should definitely be the Packers. But unfortunately for Green Bay, things have not been the most pretty by any means offensively. Green Bay has scored a combined 20 points in their last 2 games played, combined with 4 turnovers on top of that as well. And I understand you lose Tucker Kraft. Matthew Golden wasn't playing last week as well, but on top of that, you're also struggling to run the football at a consistent level. You're averaging about 99 rushing yards per game over your last 4. There's a lot going on with this offense, and a lot of people are asking a lot of questions. Whether do you blame the offensive line? Is it Jordan Love? Is it something in the receiving room? Like, what is going on here? Is it the play calling? I feel like we're seeing fingers get pointed in a lot of different directions here. I'm hearing a large crowd point at Jordan Love right now, though. But ultimately, you have a Giants defense that has not necessarily been the most impressive by any means. And you also have a Giants team that's coming in, having recently fired their head coach. Mike Kafka is going to be their interim head coach moving forward, the offensive coordinator here. And for what it's worth, this Giants defense is allowing 27 points per game and the 4th most offensive yards per game amongst anyone in the NFL, coupled with a defense that's force one singular takeaway in their last 4 games. If there was ever a get-right game for the Green Bay Packers, I think this Giants team might be the team to do so. Now, on the flip side, you also have the fact that Jameis Winston is going to be the starting quarterback, as Jackson Dart has been ruled out for this one here as he goes through concussion protocol. I think if there's anything that you can expect in this game, it's going to be a high passing attempt game from Jameis Winston, who's going to be playing quarterback. And it's going to be something along the lines of, you're probably going to see a couple touchdowns, maybe even 3, but you're also going to see a couple of interceptions, maybe even 3. The Giants are unfortunately missing Jackson Dart in this one, Malik Neighbors, Cam Scatabo. This offense has been losing key players, it feels like, if not every week, every other week, every couple of weeks. And you have a tough Green Bay defense to play against here. You're looking at a group of guys led by Tyrone Tracy, Theo Johnson, Wan'Dale Robinson, and it sounds like Darius Slayton's going to miss this game as well. This should be a Packers W. It absolutely should be. Everything is pointing to a Packers W here. However, for some reason, I feel like the Giants could at least make this game interesting for some reason. So I like the Packers, but something along the lines of like 21-14. Something just screams overly difficult matchup for no reason to me. And it's not the head coach has been fired, interim head coach boost thing that tends to happen sometimes. I'm actually not really a firm believer in that. I feel like that's more just a product of circumstance more than anything else. But the Packers have just not been playing the best of football offensively, and something tells me, like, I wouldn't be shocked if for some reason, like, the pass rush in New York just really is getting home and getting after Jordan Love in this game, and the Packers end up either maybe with a turnover or 2 that they should not have had. They're settling on 3 and outs more than they should be. But for some reason, something tells me Packers win, but it's going to be like pulling teeth getting the job done, hence the 21-14 victory I have set up for them here. Now we'll look at the Bengals and the Steelers, as the Steelers need to make good on not only their last matchup with the Bengals, but also just this secondary that has been really struggling, and a pass defense overall that is just not getting the job done. Pittsburgh's defense, the first time these two teams played, was a bit of a disaster, and that might even be a bit of an understatement, allowing 470 yards of total offense as Jamar Chase and T. Higgins had their way with this secondary. Now, obviously, things have not gotten that much better since. They did have a little bit of a solid game against the Chargers last week. They still lost the matchup, and obviously they brought in Asante Samuel Jr. because they knew they needed to take care of some of the issues they're having in that secondary. You've seen them move Jalen Ramsey to safety for games. There's a lot going on here, and Cincinnati's coming off a bye week, and Joe Flacco's coming off throwing for 4 touchdowns and 470 yards against Chicago just a couple of weeks ago. So this defense for Pittsburgh needs to be ready. Their pass rush is certainly a unit that could be a big problem for them, but we saw in that game, to eliminate some of the risk of that pass rush that they were facing, Cincinnati was just getting the ball out as quickly as they can. Joe Flacco, veteran mind, he knows, got to get the ball out quick, got to get it to your playmakers because that pass rush is coming, and they took advantage of that, dishing the ball to Jamar Chase, who I believe caught 16 passes in that first matchup. So I'll be interested in seeing how this defense fares, but I don't necessarily have the most of highest hopes. On the other side, Cincinnati's defense, they're not looking too hot themselves. They're by far the worst defense in the NFL right now as it currently stands, leading the league in points per game allowed at 33 right now. But Pittsburgh's coming off a pretty ugly performance offensively, and they kind of need themselves a bounce back here. Cincinnati's also going to be without Trey Hendrickson, and they need to find a way to get right here. I mean, because you're looking at last week, the 10 points scored, 3 offensive turnovers, 2 of them coming from Aaron Rodgers in that one. This is a good bounce back opportunity here. And if you're not going to bounce back in this game, I guess my bigger question would be, what defense are you bouncing back against? So I guess this one really boils down to, do you trust the Pittsburgh Steelers offense to be able to keep pace with this Bengals team that ultimately outpaced them the first time around that they played? I think if Pittsburgh just takes care of the ball, they should be the better team in this one here, especially being in Pittsburgh now, Cincinnati on the road, having to travel to you. There's a few things that have me leaning more Pittsburgh in this one. And I liked Pittsburgh in the first matchup, but I was also really concerned about what that offense could do to them, especially through the air. And all of my concerns were realized, and even on a higher level than I was probably anticipating. So I'm going to take the Steelers on this one here, but once again, I am really concerned about what's going on with that secondary. I'm hoping Asante Samuel Jr., if he ends up playing this week, can add a bit of a boost to that unit there. The pass rush needs to get home. You're looking at TJ Watt, you're looking at Cam Hayward and all those other guys over there, and you're telling them, we have got to get to Joe Flacco. He is a statue in the pocket. Do not let him escape. Do not let him beat you. You got to get to him. I'm going to take the Steelers. Higher scoring affair once again between these two teams, but I think maybe a little bit lower this time around, 28-27. But I do think the Bengals absolutely make the Steelers work for this one here. And once again, and I'm pretty sure I said this the first time around, I would not be shocked by another Cincinnati upset, because I am fearful of what this pass defense looks like right now in Pittsburgh. The next one we have is the Texans versus Titans, and once again, the Texans will be without C.J. Stroud here. So the big question is this going to be a problem for the Texans here? Now, it took a little bit, but Davis Mills did ultimately eventually catch fire late against the Jaguars, sparking a comeback effort where they came away with a W, finishing with 292 yards and a couple of passing touchdowns, heavily leaning on Nico Collins, of course, dishing out some touchdown passes to tight end Dalton Schultz and Jaden Higgins, the young rookie wide receiver. Tennessee's defense hasn't necessarily been good or bad this year. It's been somewhere in the middle of like league average to maybe slightly below, depending on like the week that you're looking at. But I'm going to be interested in seeing how this Texans O-line holds up here and how Davis Mills responds, because if there's one thing you do need to respect about this Tennessee Titans defense, it's some of the big men that they have in the middle of that group there, and that's, of course, Jeffrey Simmons and T'Vondre Sweat. Houston's O-line was a really big concern last season, and even the earlier, first 2, maybe 3 weeks of the season, looked like they may still be struggling. But over the last handful of weeks, the pass protection has gotten better. And they've even been able to get some push in the run game as well. So I will be curious how this offensive line holds up against a really tough test in a T'Vondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons-led defensive line. I do think the Texans are up for the task. It's more so just like curiosity and how they handle it this time around more than anything else. On the other side, I look at Tennessee's offensive line, and this is where the concern comes into play. I am really concerned about how this Tennessee offensive line holds up against Houston. And that was my concern the first time around, too, and it remains the same here. Tennessee's pass protection is currently first in sacks allowed with 38. They are also bottom 5 in pressure rate allowed. So Cam Ward, under about as much pressure as possible, and he's been hit and sacked more than anybody else in the NFL so far this season. And on top of that, to double down on just how much this offensive line has struggled, with those numbers, they have seen the third lowest blitz rate in the NFL. Teams are so confident rushing for and getting after Cam Ward and bringing him down, you don't even really need to blitz to be able to get after him and stall these offensive possessions that Tennessee has had this season. Houston obviously comes in with a hell of a tandem coming off the edges there. You have Danielle Hunter and Jonathan Grenard, who are combined for 14.5 sacks so far this season alone, just coming off the edge. Cam Ward's a guy that's held on to the ball quite a bit as well, as he's tried to make some things happen, navigating this wild rookie season that he's on right now, where he's currently on his second head coach already. And Houston's pass rush boasts the fastest get-off time and the fastest time to pressure, according to next-gen stats. So all of this to say, bit of a mismatch. I will be very curious to see how Davis Mills does against another not-so-great defense, but also not terrible defense in the Tennessee Titans. Again, it did take quite a bit for them to really get things going and ultimately mount that comeback that they did against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Protecting the ball, leaning on your defense, fighting through the ground game is definitely key for Houston in this one here. But I do think they get the job done. The Titans, as it currently stands, have one win on the season, and that one win was absolutely handed to them by the Arizona Cardinals. So at this point, I do think, even if it is you're sitting here on the road and you're with your backup quarterback, I still like the Houston Texans despite that. I have them winning something in the ballpark of 23-10. I just think that the defense ends up being way too much for this Tennessee Titans team to deal with. They put up a goose egg the last time these two teams played, as Houston won 26-0. So I think the Texans win again, maybe a little bit closer this time, but still a pretty comfortable win for the Texans to sweep their division rival this year. The 49ers and Cardinals, the next one we have on the docket here, and all eyes obviously on Brock Purdy and how he will fare from his return from injury. Mac Jones, in his absence, 5-3 as a starter, on the season completing 69.6% of his passes, 13 touchdowns and 6 picks, and 2,100 yards. So some lofty expectations to live up to for Brock Purdy in his return. Ha ha ha. That being said, aside from holding Dallas to 17 points, Arizona's defense over the last month or so has not really been great. So I think this is actually a really good opportunity for Brock Purdy to get back into the swing of things and find some rhythm. Also, the offense is probably the healthiest it's been all season. So this is actually a really good spot, in my opinion, for Brock Purdy to make his return in. You couple that with the fact that the Cardinals, something happened last week, and I'm not really sure if it was just not being ready, if the Seahawks are really just that good, and there's that much of a discrepancy between both those teams. But something happened last week, because Jacoby Brissett, up until last week, had been throwing the football pretty effectively, and he's done a good job taking care of the ball. 8 touchdowns to just 1 interception, but a couple of strip sacks that went for 6, courtesy of DeMarcus Lawrence, and just the offense not really getting anywhere until they were down. I believe it was 35 or 38 before Arizona put their first 38-0, whatever the score was, before Arizona finally put some points on the board here. The passing attack has at least looked solid. And you have a good opportunity with a extremely banged up defense over there in San Francisco that we could definitely see some points in this one. I'll be curious to see just what Arizona looks like coming off of that shellacking, though, because that is one of those. Arizona's had 2 games now where I feel like if you wanted to have confidence just ripped out of a team's soul, you've got it with Arizona. You have the loss to the Tennessee Titans and then just getting absolutely slaughtered in the first half of the game, let alone the entirety of the game against Seattle last week. So I'll be curious to see what Arizona looks like. This one feels like it could be close, though, either way, just because for what it's worth, San Francisco's defense is a bit of a concern. Like you're looking at Nick Bosa done for the season, Fred Warner done for the season, Michael Williams done for the season. Like you've got a lot of key guys on that defense done for the year, not coming back and missing from this lineup. And you got a lot of guys that are dealing with something that are like on the injury report, may or may not be questionable for the game, but they're all dealing with something. So I think Arizona might hang around in this one, but I think the 49ers should get the job done. It's NFC West always a tough one because the road games end up being real wonky and the better team can lose any given road game, in my opinion, for the NFC West. But I do think the 49ers get the job done here 24-22. This is one of those toss-up games for me, though. Like, if Arizona came out with the win, I also wouldn't be surprised because San Francisco's not necessarily a perfect team by any means as it currently stands, but I do trust in Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, and George Kittle to lead the way for this team with a Jawan Jennings and, of course, all the other guys in tow on offense that they should be able to outperform Arizona in that defense. Next one we look at here, and man, this one has a case for game of the week. Seahawks versus Rams, NFC West clash for supremacy as the winner takes the lead in the NFC West, both teams currently sitting at 7-2. Both of these teams boast top-flight offenses and top-flight passing attacks more than anything else. Sam Darnold versus Matthew Stafford as an elite QB matchup in 2025 is a crazy thing to be saying and talking about. It feels insane to say. That being said, you look at Matthew Stafford and the way he's been playing, 3 straight games of 4 passing touchdowns or more, going 5, 4, and 4, respectively, over the last 3 weeks, where you have Sam Darnold coming in, and he is, and it's not even close anymore because Drake May has come back to earth a little bit, but even he's still having a really good season. Sam Darnold completing nearly 70% of his deep balls, going 20 air yards or more right now. Second place is Drake May at 50%. He's sitting at 69.6. Nobody is throwing a better deep ball to their wide receivers than Sam Darnold, and a lot of that has to do, of course, with the elite wide receiver that he's working with in Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is making his case this year for best wide receiver in the NFL, sitting on 1,041 yards, which is far and away the best in the NFL. He's got a little over, 210 yards more than Jamar Chase, who's sitting at second place right now, averaging 16.5 yards per reception, a whopping 16.5, and 5 receiving touchdowns to boot. Then on the flip side, you look at LA. They got Puka Nacua, obviously, and it sounds like Devontae Adams listed as questionable here, so that is definitely a wrinkle to add to that as well. But Puka Nacua, who's obviously missed like a game and a half this season due to injury, 775 yards, 11.7 yards per reception, 4 touchdowns for him as well. You have one of the more exciting passing attack matchups that I think you will get all season long between both of these teams, and solid running games to go with it as well. Both of them averaging roughly the same yards per game on the ground. Seattle has the edge by like 1 yard per game. They're both averaging roughly in the same ballpark of yards per attempt as well, slight edge to LA. But other than that, you really have to look at the defenses and go, all right, so which one of these defenses is going to stop the opposing offense? That's really what this boils down to. And I mean, Seattle allowing 19 points per game, the Rams allowing 17 points per game, both of them with really impressive pass rushes. Both defenses can take away the football. LA has 14, Seattle has 12 takeaways. Both defenses are allowing roughly the same in terms of passing yards per game at about 216. You give a slight edge to the run defense of Seattle by like 5 yards. Both of these teams match up incredibly well and wildly enough, like extremely similarly. It's mind-blowing the way these two teams kind of have set themselves up here. I ultimately think, though, this is one of those games where you're probably sitting there and going, like, what is the edge? Like, what stands out to you the most? Seattle's pass rush has been a little bit better than LA's so far this season, just in terms of like statistical numbers. They've got 32 sacks to LA's 27. But Seattle's offensive line has been incredible to watch this season. They have been by far the best pass-protecting offensive line, having given up only 10 sacks so far this season, which is a big reason why, in my opinion, Sam Darnold is having so much success this year. And it was something that I was concerned about because up until like last season, I mean, Seattle's offensive line has not been great in pass protection for a few years now. And even last year, it got better, but it still wasn't necessarily great. And we've all seen what Sam Darnold looks like when he's under pressure, uncomfortable, and seeing ghosts. So for them to be able to do what they've been able to do this year and open up the passing game and just open up the field for Sam Darnold, it's been incredible to watch. And that is something that I do think gives Seattle a slight edge. But I can't ignore just how lights out Matthew Stafford is playing right now. Nobody over the past month has been throwing the football as effectively and as efficiently, whether they're facing pressure or not, as Matthew Stafford. And I think that's kind of what gives me the edge for LA as opposed to Seattle in this one here. I think both these passing attacks dominate. I think both of these defenses are going to be put to work in this game. And I do think this ends up being, in my opinion, the most exciting matchup of the weekend, just with the way the offenses are built and how the defenses are set up as well. I think I'm going LA, and I have them winning something in the ballpark of like 31-29. Like, I'm expecting a lot of points. If both these quarterbacks throw for 3 touchdowns or more, I would not be surprised. Maybe one or both of them is pushing north of 300 passing yards. It just feels like one of those games where you have 2 quarterbacks playing at the highest of levels right now, in each in their own way as well, that they're going to take these defenses to task, and it's going to be a tough one for them. And ultimately, whichever pass rush maybe gets like the slight advantage, maybe ultimately comes up with like the big sack on 3rd down, or maybe a strip sack, or maybe like forcing the quarterback into a poor mistake. And for what it's worth, Matthew Stafford's sitting on 25 touchdowns to 2 picks. Like, he's not turning the ball over. I think I'm going to go LA here. This one's a toss-up for me, though. I'm just more excited to see this game than anything else. Like, even if I get this wrong, I don't even care. I'm just really looking forward to seeing these 2 teams duke it out here, because these are 2 of the best teams in the NFL right now, in my opinion, and they both just boast fantastic passing attacks, good run games, great defenses, great pass rushes, offensive lines that can hold up. This matchup has everything. So more than anything else, I'm just excited to see the game play out. But I'll take the Rams 31-29 in an exciting contest that unfortunately isn't the Sunday Night Football game, but it's not like we have a bad Sunday Night Football matchup either. The next one we're looking at here, Ravens and Browns. I will say this. It's never simple when AFC North games are held in Cleveland. And this is something that I've never actually gone back and looked at, but was something I decided that when I was looking at this game here, and the feeling came up again where I'm like, oh my God, AFC North game in Cleveland. What is the record of the AFC North when playing in Cleveland over the last 5 years was kind of what I just wanted to see. So going back since 2020, I went and pulled the numbers here. Cleveland is 11-5 at home against the AFC North over the last 5 seasons. They are 4-1 versus Pittsburgh in Cleveland. They're 3-2 versus Baltimore in Cleveland, and they're 4-2 against Cincinnati in Cleveland. They already played Cincinnati this year, hence why they have the extra game there. That is absurd. For whatever reason, Cleveland gives their division rivals some of their best punches in Cleveland, and that is something that does concern me a little bit, because while the Ravens have Lamar and he's playing this week, and it seems like they're getting healthy and they're getting back into the thick of things, and they handled Cleveland fairly well the first time they played, something about AFC North games in Cleveland always slides so heavily into the Browns' favor, and they always play so well. So I am concerned about that and just the history of that, because it's been a thing over the last at least 5 years, and it felt that way. And when I came up with the numbers, I was happy to see that, because I was like, there's no way I'm just making this up in my head. That being said, Cleveland has struggled to really do anything offensively, and this Dylan Gabriel experiment is just, it's getting mind-numbing to watch. I don't know at what point they plan on turning the ball over to Shedeur Sanders, but I'm really hoping it's sooner rather than later, because at this point, it's just really not working. We've seen Cleveland score more than 20 points in only 2 games this season, and one of those games, it wasn't even more than 20. They just hit the 20-point mark. The other one was a 31 against the Dolphins, and I mean, even that was, they had a pick 6 in that game from Tyson Campbell, so the offense really only contributed 24 points in that game, so you haven't seen a lot from this offense at all this season, and I don't know if this Browns offense can keep up with anyone, let alone a Baltimore Ravens team that, even if they just get something along the lines of 3 or 4 touchdowns in this game, if Cleveland's able to keep up. I feel like Baltimore, the way they've gotten healthy and the way the defense has played over the last month or so, they're really starting to find their footing. And the offense, I think, is still working on that a bit, especially with Lamar missing some time. I think the Ravens come in. It's a defensive slugfest. They win 28-14, where the score is 21-14 in the fourth quarter, and you finally see the Ravens break away 2 scores, and they come away with a comfortable win when it's all said and done. But I could see Cleveland making the Ravens work for it in this one here. It's one of those things about AFC North football in Cleveland. Again, the numbers don't lie. The Browns are 11-5 at home against the AFC North over the last 5 years in Cleveland. It's a real thing. I don't know what it is, but Cleveland gives everyone in their division their best punches when they're at home. But again, Ravens, 28-14, they pull away late. This next one's another divisional matchup. This one, Chiefs and Broncos here. And this is going to be a big game and moment for the Broncos defense because things have not been pretty for the offense of the Denver Broncos for some time, to the point where now it's even being acknowledged by their head coach. J.K. Dobbins potentially missing this game as well only makes that worse and has me really concerned. And honestly, it's really unfortunate that Patrick Surtain is not going to be available for the Broncos in this game, because I would probably feel a little bit differently about this game if he was available, just knowing that he's running things in that secondary the way he does. That being said, Denver's ability to pass rush and stop the run is going to be crucial in this game here. They have got to be able to slow down the Chiefs running backs, and they've got to make Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable. It seems like Isaiah Pacheco might miss this game, which is a benefit to Denver, but I'm really just looking at what this pass rush can do, because if you can get after Patrick Mahomes and you can make him uncomfortable, especially this season, it hasn't been perfect for him by any means. Patrick Mahomes right now boasts the league's third worst completion percentage when facing pressure, sitting at 39.4% according to Next Gen Stats. If you can make him uncomfortable, you can force that, even if it's not a turnover, you can put him in a position where he's not completing his passes, or maybe you're bringing him down for a sack and you're putting them behind the chains on first down, on second down, or coming up with the big stop on third down to force a fourth and long, and ultimately not being able to convert. I'm really looking at this defense to step up big time in this game, especially at home, if they want to come away with the win in this one here. On the flip side, for the Chiefs, like I said, pass rush is everything over there. Denver Broncos run defense also pretty good. Simply dropping back and passing with Mahomes is not going to win the Chiefs this football game, and that's why I am looking at the running backs in place of Isaiah Pacheco to ultimately come away and help the Chiefs win this football game. You're looking at, of course, Kareem Hunt. You're looking at Brashard Smith, and you're telling them, you guys got to lead the way, because right now as it stands, I do not think it's a coincidence that the Chiefs are 0-3 when Patrick Mahomes is the leading rusher for this team. When this offense gets one-dimensional, there's still too much youth on that offensive side of the ball as Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy continue to develop into the stars that they need them to be. Like, yes, you have Travis Kelce there, but there's still growing going on within this Chiefs offense. Like, it's by far from perfect at this current stage. And if you have Mahomes being the guy that's leading the way for you on the ground, and you're getting one-dimensional and you're trying to drop back and pass 40-plus times in this game, or even high 30s from Mahomes, I do not know if you're winning this football game, especially on the road in Denver. Again, the Broncos pass rush, league best by a pretty sizable margin. They lead the league in sacks at 46 right now. They're the only team in the NFL with a sack rate in double digits as it stands at 11.7%. You have got to have a balanced attack against this Broncos defense, and they're 6th against the run, so that's easier said than done, but they've got to establish some sort of run game to prevent that Broncos defense from just teeing off on Patrick Mahomes all game long. This one's a really tough one for me to decide on, because I am a firm believer in what that Broncos defense is doing over there, and I'm having a really hard time wanting to pick against them, but that offense is just so scary to me with Denver. I cannot trust in that unit. And in minus a J.K. Dobbins scares me even more about what they're doing over there. And I just don't know if you're going to figure out your offense against a Steve Spagnuolo-led defense in Kansas City that has been playing pretty good itself this season. So I like the Chiefs 20-17 defensive slugfest. I just kind of see it ending in a way where the Denver Broncos offense just doesn't quite have enough in the tank to ultimately come away with the win. The last game we're looking at here, because again, Monday night we will preview on Sunday. So again, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out. We got ourselves Lions and Eagles, Sunday Night Football clash. A really fun game here. Honestly, I'm okay with this being Sunday Night Football, even though I'm really excited for Seattle, LA. But this is a big test for the Eagles' run defense this week, because things did not start off great for Philadelphia against the run. They were allowing 134 yards per game from weeks 1 to 6 on the ground, but over their last 3, tightening up, settling down, 87 yards per game roughly, give or take, week by week for the last 3 games that they've played. And that's good because everyone knows Detroit's bread and butter is running the football, handing it off to Jahmyr Gibbs, handing it off to David Montgomery, and beating you into submission as the game goes on. It is the Dan Campbell special, so much so that he didn't like the way things are playing out, and he took over play calling last week, and things looked right back on track against the Washington Commanders. They rolled for 226 yards on the ground last week against Washington. So Philadelphia has its work cut out for them. They've got to keep Detroit somewhere within like the ballpark of like 120 yards or less. And I say 120 because it's tough trying to keep Detroit around 100 yards or less. So if you can hold them to around 120, I think you could put yourself in a decent enough spot. The other thing I'm really looking at in this game here is going to be the ever-evolving question and just drama-filled situation that's brewing right now regarding the Eagles' offense. The A.J. Brown drama hit an all-time high this past week with what he said on a Twitch stream about being unhappy. It's a lot. And I was actually one of those people that thought it was more noise being made outside than anything else. But now seeing that, clearly there is some serious unhappiness. And A.J. Brown even doubled down and basically was like, I'm not apologizing for this either. So now you've got to look at this offense and go, all right, so how are you going to beat this Detroit Lions defense that's been flirting with roughly being like a top 10 unit fairly all season long? Philadelphia's won games running the ball. They've won games passing the football as well. We've seen them push for north of 200 yards, just like last week on the ground. We've seen Jalen Hurts throw for over 300 yards. We've seen him throw for 4 passing touchdowns in a game. We've seen Philadelphia doing it a ton of different ways. I'm very interested in seeing now if A.J. Brown gets a far more significant role in the offense this week, or if it gets mitigated even further than what we saw from them last week. There's just a lot of uncertainty right now going on with that. And again, it's stuff that I was kind of refusing to see. Like, I was hearing the noise. I was seeing people talk about it. But I just felt like it's typical nonsense surrounding the Eagles. They're still one of the best in the NFC and in the NFL, and it's just that noise that surrounds them until they get to the playoffs and everyone kind of stops talking about it sort of thing. But obviously, it's very much more real than I was willing to acknowledge up until this point. So with a defense that is very good overall in Detroit, however they go to attack this defense is honestly anyone's guess, like at this point, because we've seen varied success with Philadelphia running the football. We've seen varied success, and honestly, I would argue even more success throwing the football than anything else this season. So if they're going to try and take it to that passing defense, it's been a pretty good unit so far this season. They're roughly a top 10 unit there in terms of yards per game allowed through the air, but they're also one of the best third down defenses too. So you got to be consistent with what you do. I really don't know what to make of this Eagles offense coming into this game here with all that going on. So I do think some question marks are up in the air. I will be curious to see how much they try to challenge on the ground, though, with Saquon, because you do have a pretty solid run defense you're going up against over there as well. As for who I think is going to win this game, I mean, it being in Philadelphia really complicates it. Like, if this game was in Detroit, I would be so on top of taking the Lions, it wouldn't even be funny. But it being in Philadelphia, it makes it a far more of a toss-up type of game because the Eagles are really good at home. It's very tough to take down the Eagles on the road, or if you're the road team, I should say. That being said, something tells me that they figured it out last week, the Lions, that is. The offense looked by far the best it has all season long with Dan Campbell calling the plays. And it seems like that's probably going to be the direction they take going forward with how good they looked. If that's the offense that the Lions are going to be boasting the rest of the way, they're going to be problematic. And something tells me that, yes, while the run defense has improved over the last 3 weeks for Philadelphia, you look at the competition that they were facing in those 3 weeks, and you could even call into that a little bit of question, or call that into question a little bit. So I think I'm leaning Detroit, but by like a squeaking by type of game. Like, I still think Philadelphia, really good football team, even plus or minus A.J. Brown, like that roster's still stacked to the brim all over the place, offensively and defensively. And I don't expect that this team is just going to get pushed over at home. But I do think the Lions can squeak out the win here. And again, a lot of it has to do with that shift in the offensive philosophy with Dan Campbell calling the plays now. I think they're going to test this run defense. We're going to find out where this Eagles defense actually stands this week. But I think I like the Lions 27-24. Exciting contest. fight to the finish type of game. By no means does either team run away with this one. It is a tooth and nail rock fight type of game all the way to the finish line. But I do think I like the Lions here. They looked so good last week, and I understand the opponent that they were playing as well in the Washington Commanders and where they currently stand. But some of that also feels like it had to do with Dan Campbell taking over the play calling and getting back to more of the offense and style that he had while Ben Johnson was still here. So give me the Lions, 27-24, big upset victory on the road to get themselves in the win column and firmly square in that race in the NFC. Those are my predictions, though, going into week number 11 of the NFL. Like I said, Sunday, we'll predict for the Monday Night Football matchup, so make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss out there. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I will see you all on Sunday to preview Monday Night Football action. But until then, have a good one.